Okay, thank you very much for coming today. I'm going to make a statement, and then Anika is going to make a statement, and then Daniela will also make a statement. On May 22nd, 2018, my law firm filed a lawsuit on behalf of Daniela Mohazab against Dr. George Tyndall and the University of Southern California, USC. Today, we have amended our lawsuit to reflect that we are now suing on behalf of 24 women who allege that they were also victims of Dr. Tyndall and USC. In our lawsuit, we allege sexual battery, gender violence, sexual harassment, violation of California's Unruh Civil Rights Act, violation of the California Bain Act, sexual harassment in violation of the Education Code, negligent hiring and retention, negligent supervision, fraudulent misrepresentation, negligent misrepresentation, intentional infliction of emotional distress. We are seeking compensatory and punitive damages according to proof at trial. In our lawsuit, some of our clients have decided that their names may be revealed on the complaint. 2 of our clients who have given us permission to use their names are here with us today. They are Daniela Mohazab, who was our first client to file a complaint, and Anika Nurayan. Get that right? Okay, close. She'll give it to us, whose name has been added to our lawsuit today. Many of our other clients have chosen to be listed on the lawsuit as Jane Doe. Plaintiffs who allege that they were sexually assaulted or abused have a right to retain their privacy, and they are not required to disclose their true legal name in the complaint, which is a public document. We support the right of an individual to choose either to be listed as Jane Doe or to provide her true name. Either way, she has the right to assert her rights in a lawsuit. The lawsuit, which we filed today, is 53 pages long. I think that it's important to provide some examples of what some of our clients have alleged in this lawsuit. Daniela went in for a standard STD test and to talk about medication. Dr. Tyndall had his laptop and looked up the medications. Dr. Tyndall asked Daniela about her race. She responded that she was Filipina. She remembers that Tyndall's office was messy and that there were framed pictures of Tyndall's wife, who was also Filipina. Tyndall wore unprofessional clothing, leather lace-up shoes, loose khakis, a button-up short-sleeved shirt. During the meeting in his office, Tyndall told Daniela that she was pretty. He related her to his wife by saying that Filipinas are the smartest, most giving, and gentle people. He told her that Filipinas are good in bed. He also said Filipinas are devoted to their partners and that they don't sleep with many people in their lifetime. He asked her intimate sexual details about her life and related her answers to being Filipina, saying, "I guess that's because you're mixed," with a creepy smile. In the exam room, he told her the previous doctors, Dr. Pinanong, STD tests were conducted incorrectly and inaccurately. He asked her to undress from the bottom down, and he stood there watching while she did so and smiled. He then instructed her to lie on the examination table, which she did. He put her feet in the stirrups for the STD examination and gave her some paper to put on the top of her upper legs. Then, without a glove, Defendant Tyndall put his 2 fingers in her vagina and felt around. Quote, "I think we better use some lube," end quote, with a snide look on his face as he opened a packet of lube that he retrieved from the cabinet on the side of the room next to the patient chair. He felt around her vagina by moving his fingers around inside for a few minutes. Tyndall instructed another one of our clients, also known as Jane Doe, to completely undress. She tried to cover herself as best she could with a small cover given to her, but he told her to stand up. He proceeded to put both his hands on her breasts, squeeze them, and said, quote, "Wow, you have such perky little breasts for being such a tall girl. It must be because you're a fit soccer player," end quote. Defendant also told another Jane Doe to lay on the examination table and to open her legs. He then proceeded to take pictures of Doe's vagina. He thereafter digitally penetrated her vagina and then put his other hand under her and proceeded to penetrate her anus at the same time. He said, "We have to check inside." After removing his finger from her anus, he inserted a speculum and took some pictures of her vagina. He explained that he was taking pictures to see if she had any STDs and told her to return for a follow-up as he would have pictures at that time. She returned and she showed her the photos, he did, saying he did not find anything. Tyndall, with a female nurse present but who was turned away, digitally penetrated another Jane Doe's vagina, moved his fingers around, and in a sexual manner said she had good pelvic muscles. He also thrust his pelvis toward the table while his fingers were in her vagina. Another Jane Doe plaintiff went to USC Health Center to see a gynecologist, believing that she had a cyst. She was given an appointment to see Tyndall. He touched her cyst and asked if it was painful, and she replied no. He asked if she was sexually active and, "Do you have painful sex?" He digitally penetrated her and felt around her vagina while commenting that her hymen must still be intact. He finished with the examination and said, "We're done." However, he remained in the room. She had no choice but to dress with him in the room. He said, "Wow, what's your background?" She replied, "I'm Latina." Tyndall asked, "Mexican?" He said, "You have such pretty eyes and big, beautiful eyelashes. You know, you remind me of either a girl I used to date or a girl from college." She had big, pretty eyelashes. "You look so much like her that I have to take a photo of you so I can show to my other friend." She said no. She did not want him to take her picture, but he insisted and said he had a camera. She felt forced to agree, and he pulled out a Polaroid camera from the box and began to take pictures of her. Tyndall inserted a speculum in another Jane Doe's vagina, and she squirmed. Tyndall asked, "What's wrong?" Doe answered that it was uncomfortable. He replied, "Well, you're pretty tight down there. Your boyfriend must like it." Another Jane Doe plaintiff of mixed race went in for a gynecological exam. Tyndall inserted several fingers at once into her vagina, commenting that she was very lucky because you look white, but have the tight vagina muscle tone of an Asian girl. He commented about how passionate and sexy Vietnamese women were, and Vietnamese women could be so good at sex because of their fieriness and bodies. He told Doe that when she started to have sex, she would be great. There was a female nurse present during the exam with her back to Jane Doe during the exam. When she left, Tyndall took photos of Doe's vulva for her medical record. Another Jane Doe came in due to heavy bleeding around her period and spoke to Tyndall and a chaperone, who was also in the room for pre-examination. When they left the room, she took out her tampon, wrapped it in tissue, and placed it in a small trash can in the room. When Tyndall and the chaperone returned, she sat on the table and laid back and put her feet into the stirrups. The Jane Doe looked at the chaperone, who stood with her arms crossed over her chest. Tyndall told the Jane Doe to open wider, wider, okay, wider, wider, while she was grimacing from discomfort. He inserted multiple fingers into her vagina and told her to relax and that her vagina was very tight and that her hymen was still halfway intact and super elastic. He smiled eerily and looked directly at her. He pulled out his hand and a small splatter of blood spilled onto the floor. Tyndall stepped in the blood and tracked it around the room with the bottom of his shoe. He told her the blood was likely stress-related, but to come back for a follow-up. Before leaving, she saw Tyndall had retrieved her tampon from the trash can and placed it on the desk. Everything I've stated is directly allegations from the lawsuit that was filed this morning. Our 24 clients are very courageous to have decided to join this lawsuit and reveal what are, in some cases, very intimate and traumatic details of what they allege that they suffered in their interactions with Dr. Tyndall, their gynecologist at USC. We look forward to asserting, protecting, and vindicating their rights in a court of law. It's time for justice for those who trusted Dr. Tyndall and USC and whose trust was completely betrayed. And now I'd like to introduce Anika. Why don't you change places with me? Okay? Thank you.
My name is Anika Narayanan. I'm a rising senior at the University of Southern California. And during the spring semester of my freshman year, in 2016, I was a patient of George Tyndall's over the course of 2 months, and I was 18 years old. My first appointment with George Tyndall in February of 2016 was my first appointment with any gynecologist. I requested a routine STD check and a birth control consultation. During the exam, I was not given any sort of covering, and the entire lower half of my body was exposed. Using 2 fingers, Tyndall performed an examination in a deeply penetrative massaging motion, applying pressure as he commented on the tightness and elasticity of my vagina, as well as my broken hymen. At times throughout the procedure, he kept a hand below my buttocks while using his dominant to perform the examination. Afterwards, we met in his office, where we engaged in a conversation surrounding my heritage, family, and social life, where he asked me at one point if I had disappointed my Indian family by not pursuing a degree in STEM. He asked about my sleeping, sexual, and drinking habits, and asked if the reason why I hadn't used a condom was because I had been too exhausted and forgotten. He refused to give me a birth control consultation, citing a policy that required a second appointment be made. He instead provided me with pamphlets about insomnia. My second appointment with George Tyndall in March of 2016 was made following a non-consensual sexual encounter that left me with tearing and bleeding. He chastised me for returning, asking me if I had forgotten my condom again. I explained the forcible circumstances briefly, but they were not discussed further. He made similar comments about my tight vagina while performing a similarly penetrative exam with 2 fingers. When he found the fissures that had caused the bleeding, he asked me what position we had assumed. I told him I did not know, so he prompted me with options. He told me that my injuries were consistent with doggy style and asked me if I did a lot of doggy style. In his office, he prescribed an over-the-counter topical cream telling me to, quote, fill my vagina and then massage the extra cream into my labia. Again, he refused to give me a birth control consultation, citing the same policy. I've spent a lot of time thinking about exactly what happened, where the fault lines are drawn, and how much validity there is in recounting my experience with George Tyndall, which fluctuated between a guarded comfort and an equally guarded dread. Asking myself, is this wrong? Is this right? Is this enough to report? Had I been sexist and regressive for wanting a female doctor in the first place? Am I being too sensitive? And even now, I've had to consider these same questions in a perverted strain of imposter syndrome, leaded down by 2 years of forgetting by both choice and nature, spent brushing off that creepy gynecologist. So 2 years later, I am not surprised that I'm not alone in this horrible regurgitation of memory. I'm ashamed, disappointed, and furious that I'm not alone, that I'm a single and short-lived example of the continued administrative negligence of an academic good old boys club, and I'm even more infuriated by the fact that countless women have confronted their experiences only to be denied action by the university. But again, I am not at all surprised. Reports of misconduct began in the early 1990s. I was born in 1997. This chronicle has both laid dormant and been institutionally bolstered for as long as the fledgling class of Tyndall's game has been alive. When you institutionalize the art of not listening, you normalize the atmosphere of student endangerment and distorted prioritization. You normalize a hierarchy that places aesthetic above morals. A university is the delicate, short-lived intermission between childhood and adulthood, granting a new and somewhat excessive freedom, but simultaneously undertaking an unequivocal responsibility to foster and protect its student body, who are infant adults only by a marginal technicality. So at our freshman convocation, President C.L. Max Nikias welcomed us to the Trojan family with a tenacity that made me smug because I already belonged to this elite club. I grew up on this campus. My father was brought from the East Coast to USC in 2000 by the former president of the university, who was then a professor, and my mother followed. So I took naps on the floor of my mother's office in the dean's suite in the old Annenberg building, and I blew my allowance in a single go at the campus center when it was still a basement food court at the age 10, desperately hoping that someone would glance over and think that I was a student. I casually referred to Viterbi professors and Annenberg staff as aunts and uncles, and some of these names appeared among the 200 listed in the faculty letter calling for the president's resignation. So this was already my family. But I've come to realize that the Trojan family mantra extends only as far as football tailgates and professional networking. In the past year, we have watched the university scramble again and again to perform damage control and put out overdue fires. Quiet settlements and equally subdued charges in the wake of breaking news coverage are a transparent and flimsy attempt to save face, succeeding only in the crystallization of a disinterested bureaucracy, an institution that capitalizes on financial prowess and big names on big buildings, often leaving the student body to pick up its own pieces when the underlying cracks in the cosmetic infrastructure give. So 10 years later, I'm now a real student here, but I no longer can rely on the familial protection I once trusted. Because to do so, after all of this, would be callow. And as I prepare to begin my senior year at the university that brought me up and then brought me right back down again, I feel betrayed and humiliated on behalf of my fellow students, past and present, who trusted this university and its leaders to be the example and exception they so desperately attempt to be. The last time I felt this humiliated, I was half naked on Tyndall's exam table. USC is a beautiful school with many beautiful buildings and privileges and opportunities for those who occupy its space, and I meet that with gratitude. But a place is nothing without its people, and the university is a disappointment to the parents who trusted it with their children, the children who trusted it with their burgeoning adulthood, the women who came forward and demanded their rights be observed, and the community who took the maxim of Trojan family at face value. I mean, how can you stand by and call this university a family and then turn a blind eye to the continued degradation and denial of your own family's rights? So Tyndall is gone, and he won't practice at the University of Southern California again, but this system will continue its exponential process of failing, one that will not be curtailed until responsibility is fully accepted, and dilatory convictions and expressions of remorse are exchanged for active and tangible change. And if the current administration is incapable of executing this adjustment, I have no doubt in my mind that others can. Because this is not a business, this is not a machine, this is a school. And where you might think people are silent and emotionless cogs, they are actually real people with agency and voices. All I've ever known is academia, so I know the beauty and innovation it can foster, and the conversations and collaboration it stimulates, and the incredible cast of humans it engenders. Because I have seen academia become a family, among them mine. But this school, this echelon of materialism and name recognition and poker face neutrality is not a family, because families protect and respect their own, and USC has failed to do either. Every brick building you build, every big name partnership you secure, every act of aesthetic beautification is nullified when you continuously neglect the interior. So I believe that it is my responsibility to speak out against this shameful pattern of omission, both on behalf of myself and the other voices that have been ignored, silenced, or lost in the folds of this decades-long injustice.
We're going to change places with Daniel.
Thank you. I'm really proud of you for sharing that story. I am proud of the young women speaking up now. Not only am I proud, but I feel full of support for them and for the Trojan community. We are coming together to fight against injustice. This proves that the Trojan community is strong outside of the classroom, and that we do have the strength and power to change the institutional misconduct. The changes that have already started in the institution prove USC's capability to change. Now, we must continue to fight for justice. Just because changes are occurring does not mean that it retroactively fixes what happened previously. We have been hurt. Dr. Tyndall has hurt the victims. He has hurt our livelihood, consumed our time in mental health, and he has been the root of distrust and discomfort that we now face. The last thing I ever imagined was to distrust a part of my own university. Let's work together to transform USC to the greatest university that we have envisioned it to be. For those of you who have shared their stories with the public, thank you. I am proud of all of you. For those who have not shared their stories or their names, I understand. Just know that you have a support system here. We are here together, fighting for justice.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll change. Thank you.
Sorry.
Okay. Sitting behind me is my partner, Michael Morocco, and also my partner, Dolores Leal, and we'll be happy to take a few questions.
Can you address, both of you, please, where you had the strength to come forward today? As you said, you understand why the other women didn't, and I think we all understand that. My goodness, the strength, your names are out here, very intimate details. Can you please address that?
Okay, let's shoot over, and then you can be in front of the microphones. Okay, let's move over it, everyone. Okay, go ahead. All right.
I think I found the strength from my parents and my support system through my friends. I think I spoke out because I knew that I was supported by those that I'm around. I recognize how difficult it is to speak up because of fear of being in the public eye, of possible backlash from the university, what the feeling is like to come and step onto campus after doing something like this, or to even be open to friends and family about what happened. It's not easy to come and speak up against these really private, intimate details. I want to speak up for everyone that doesn't have the voice. I've been a mental health advocate, and I really believe that even one or two people speaking up can change the climate. And I'm scared, but I'm full of gratitude for the people that have spoken up, and I believe that their justice will be made.
Before we get to Annika, why are you scared?
Of the university? Or in general?
I'm scared.
At the beginning, I was scared that there would be backlash from the university. I'm still a graduate student, so I feared that I would have to leave the university, that I would have to risk my my diploma, my classes at USC if I would have to leave. I was scared that when I walked onto campus, I wouldn't be welcome. I was scared of how I would hurt, how my friends and family would feel by hearing this story. I know that my grandmother watches the news, and knowing that she sees this story was a huge factor in thinking about how this all played. This affects everybody. This affects not just the victims, but the victims' friends and families, and that's why I was really scared.
Okay, let's move down. Okay.
So
Yeah, right in front there. Okay, good.
I think Daniela really hit the nail on the head. And I actually, coming forward after Daniela, do want to say that her original testimony was a big part of why I decided to be vocal. It was a difficult decision. I think anybody in this circumstance has a lot to grapple with when you're standing up to the institution that you belong to, the people who you exist by day to day. I think for me, being somebody who not only attends USC, but is a child of USC faculty members, who has grown up on that campus and who is so closely connected to USC on such a visceral level, it was a difficult decision because you don't want to go against your own people and you don't want to go against your past. But in the end, it's why I decided to speak up, because I love USC. And, USC is everything to me. And you need to stand up if you see something that's wrong, and you need to be a part of changing things, especially changing things that you love and want to see succeed. And that's why I decided to speak up.
So I like to quote Mark Twain's quote on courage and how that's defined. That courage is the resistance to fear, the mastery of fear, not the absence of fear. And so they are resisting the fear. They are mastering the fear. But to some extent, they may still have the fear. Any other questions?
There are now 24 names on this. Have you been contacted by more women to
Yes.
anticipate this growing?
Yes.
Roughly how much? I mean,
We
any
have
idea?
more women who allege that they are victims who have been in contact with us,
Right.
but we decided to proceed to file the amended lawsuit today. But if, as and when, the others who have contacted us and also our law firm agree to represent them, we will be filing lawsuits for them too. And we're not, this is not a class action lawsuit. We like to treat each client as an individual. Each client has had a different experience. There are some similarities, and each client has different damages. So that's how we treat them, and that's how we're litigating this case. Most are Jane Does, not all are Jane Does.
So these are separate, 24 separate lawsuits.
Well, we have, this one is an amended lawsuit, which contains 24.
Okay.
Now, when we file additional lawsuits, they will not be part of this amended lawsuit. We will file lawsuits on behalf of other individuals. So,
And it's not being filed as a class action.
yeah, that's what I had
Even
just
though
said.
there's 24,
Yes,
there's just
right.
24 individual in one lawsuit.
It's not called a class action. It's an amended lawsuit, but it's on behalf of 24 alleged victims of Dr. Tyndall and USC. The others, will not be amending this again, but we will be filing lawsuits on their behalf.
Okay.
And there are just various reasons why we didn't contain all of the allegations of additional victims in this, but we expect to be filing additional lawsuits. Okay.
Is that considered like a mass tort or?
Well, I would just call them, we have individual clients, and there are various torts that we have alleged, tort being a civil wrong, that we have alleged in this lawsuit.
You're expecting damages, certainly, but USC.
Excuse me, I'm sorry. I generally talk about mass torts, and we talk about, for example, some product that may have been inserted in someone or something they have taken that has caused them injury.
I see.
But these are torts.
Gotcha. You're expecting money, damages. USC has tons of money, but you referred to, one of you two referred to the previous scandal last fall, and then this one. Do you think the culture will change based on these 24 lawsuits, and all three of you, please? Anybody that does.
Okay, well, USC has talked about reporting failures. I'd like to personalize that. Reporting means that they have received reports or some, representatives of USC or people in the chain at USC have received reports about Dr. Tyndall, but until last year, he remained at USC treating patients. So this is not just a failure of reporting and oversight. This is a failure to protect students from Dr. Tyndall and his care or misconduct, however you would like to characterize it. So, yes, this goes to the top at USC. And through the discovery process, in the course of litigating this lawsuit, we expect to be taking depositions and also be able to discover documents of how and why USC failed to act that when they knew or should have known of what was happening with Dr. Tyndall. Because as I read at the last press conference, we have a declaration from a woman who alleges that she told at least 3 people at USC in the 1990s about Dr. Tyndall and what she thought was inappropriate conduct, including the medical clinic director, a nurse to whom the medical clinic director referred her to recount again what her allegations were, and a women's advocacy center. And still he remained at USC.
Following on from that, can you, of these Jane Does or of the 24 women in this in this suit, how far back do those cases go? I mean, obviously we've got 2016, we've got some recent ones, but how far back do these cases go?
I believe they go into the 1990s.
1990.
Early
Yeah.
90s?
1990.
Actually.
No,
The year.
1990 itself?
Yes.
Oh, wow, okay.
I think our
The
the age
complaint
of our oldest
chronological
oldest
order.
plaintiff is 54 now, so this goes back.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ms. Allred, do you think the Larry Nasser case in Michigan sets a precedent for your lawsuit, particularly in terms of potential payouts?
Well, we'll have to see. Now you're getting into the compensation. Yes, I also represented an individual in that case. Our main concern is accountability, and whatever happens to Dr. Tyndall happens to Dr. Tyndall. But we want to remember the persons who allege they are victims, and they need to be sure, as I always say, that the cost of the wrong is borne by the wrongdoer and not the victims. So the victims need to be compensated if they've incurred, they've had to pay for medical bills as a result of what happened, therapy bills, if they've lost time from work or lost wages. And again, we're also seeking, compensatory damages for their pain and suffering, and punitive damages. Punitive damages are damages to punish for conduct that shocks the conscience of the community. And so we're also seeking those damages in the event that we can prove by clear and convincing evidence that USC knew or should have known, and that whatever their conduct was shocks the conscience of the community. So we'll see what happens.
You both were very strong coming out today, but you understand this is the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
How emotionally ready are you? Are you feeling yourself for what lies ahead?
You want to say anything? Okay.
I don't think there's ever a way to be completely emotionally ready to undertake something like this at any age, in any circumstances. I think the outpouring of support, both personally and with speaking with other survivors and working with lawyers on this case, has been tremendous and has prepared me to be as prepared as I possibly can be. But again, you lose something that you can't ever get back when you begin a process like this. And so I'm ready and I'm prepared, and I think that action needs to be taken, and I'd like to participate and be an agent of productive change, but it's never going to be something that I'm completely comfortable or ready to do.
Anything else?
Danielle was answering.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay, one more time.
Shift a lot.
Go ahead.
I agree with Anika. I don't think we'll ever be fully ready for what lies ahead within the next day, week, month, year. Hopefully not 10 years. I think it takes a lot of grit and a lot of support, which I'm lucky to have from friends and family again, to get through this. I'm lucky to have other victims speak out and to have Miss Allred and the team here. I am interested to see what's going to happen when I step foot on campus on August 22nd when classes begin again, to see how I feel then. I know classmates will know, professors will know. I have a lot of professors in support of me who have emailed me already, and I'm grateful for that. But we'll never be fully prepared, and it's never going to be easy to speak on camera or talk to people, whether it's in a private conversation or something as public as this. I just want to again reiterate, though, that we are just, Anika and I and the victims that have spoken out are, we're just regular students, and we're regular people, regular girls who have just, this is unfortunately one of the worst case scenarios that could ever occur has happened. And we're speaking up. I'm really confused as to how these processes that we've discussed have been overlooked. And I think, going back to your last question, that USC, I'm hopeful that they'll actually take reports and processes seriously and care for the students. I'm really hopeful of that. Sometimes I'm overly hopeful, but I believe in USC.
We understand that LAPD is investigating. They have not yet been in communication with me, but I fully expect that they will. And I do want to say that USC should be very proud of Daniela and Anika, because they are showing leadership. And it should not just be a factor to be admitted to USC that someone has good grades. We're looking for leaders. And as a person who used to be a lecturer at USC, which I used to be back in the 70s, you know, I always thought that leadership was an important character trait that should be in any student who was accepted to what is a great university, USC. So I hope that others recognize it, whether or not they do recognize it in Daniela and Anika. That's what they have. That's who they are. They're speaking truth to power, and that's what they should do as students and as graduates one day from USC.
I'm sorry, does the LAPD have the names of your clients, or?
Well, I mean, they would certainly have Daniela because she spoke at our first news conference on this in May. They don't have the names of the others on the lawsuits, but since this is filed today, this morning, we have a case number open to the public. That would include LAPD. They would have access to this.
What would you say to victims that are watching this and maybe on the fence about coming forward or not?
I think that's an important question. And what would I say to persons who allege that they were victims of Dr. Tyndall at USC and have not yet come forward? I would say, please know that you can have a confidential conversation with us as attorneys, that your name and your information will never go anywhere without your permission in writing and without your consent. So you can learn what your legal options are. You can learn the benefits and risks of choosing any option. You can also be listed as a Jane Doe. In other words, your name will not be disclosed publicly. in a complaint, a lawsuit that is filed for you, unless, if you choose that option of being known as Jane Doe, or you can have your name there if you choose that option. But doing nothing should not be an option. You should reach out and learn what your legal options are, because education is power. And then you can make an informed decision about what you would like to do, or if you choose not to do anything, that's your privilege and your right as well. But at least learn what you can do in a timely manner, and this is the time to learn what your options are.
How does it affect your case, the fact that USC seems to have kind of accepted that they did some things wrong? I mean, Max Nikias has resigned. They've said in retrospect they should have perhaps reported this to law enforcement earlier. They've removed 2 people from the clinic. How does that posture affect how you fight this case?
Well, that's just fine, but that doesn't undo the harm, the wrong that was done to Anika, and that was done to Daniela, and that was inflicted upon other vulnerable women at USC. And so they have to be accountable for what has happened as a result of their failures to protect these women from the harm that was inflicted on them. And so I'm glad they're taking actions, but that does not yet address what has happened to many of the women who allege they were victimized. They need to be accountable to
them.
them.
Help your case that they, have apologized and they've said, yes, we, in retrospect, we see that we did some things wrong.
Well, we're always interested in admissions from any wrongdoers, including powerful institutions. So we like institutions to take responsibility in words and also in actions. We don't want what happened to these young women to happen to anybody else. So, yes, it's part of what has happened at USC, the actions they are now taking. And at the last press conference, I called for them to do an independent investigation. Reportedly, that's what they're doing. That's all good. In other words, how did they fail? Why did they fail? And we'll look forward to that report. But we're litigating on behalf of our clients. The women who allege they are victims are kind of the piece of the story that's being left out. And they matter. These are real human beings. They're not just statistics.